unmute.
All right. Can everybody hear me now online?
Good, all
Awesome.
righty.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it, you guys. My name is Andy Maybell. I am with a provider agency in Hamilton County, which is the greater Cincinnati area. We are a supported living agency of community supports. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary of being a supported living waiver provider agency in Hamilton County. As alluded to before, our agency provides exclusive supported living support. So we're providing staffing in the homes of the individuals that we support. We do not own or operate any group homes, ICFs, or anything like that. We do a lot of collaborative work with them as well. However, in other agencies in the capacity of what I'm doing right now, which is some trauma consulting work. Oh no, did it work? Oh, it's not. Maybe it's just a little lag. It's okay. It's my fault. I get really excited and pumped. Also, I've had a lot of coffees and some energy drinks, and I also found this energy gum that you can chew, and I've been chewing it all the way up 71. So if I talk fast, slow me down, and I won't feel any kind of way about it. So feel free just to stop and ask questions. This is kind of an informal conversation I'd like to have with you guys. I created a PowerPoint yesterday, and I'm happy to share some of the things that I want to talk about is kind of what our journey was as a supported living provider agency, becoming from trauma competent to trauma informed to trauma responsive. Our journey over the last number of years, how we got to where we got, sort of the impact that it provides to our organization, the individuals we support, and our staff as well. And then I'm going to dive into a little bit about the tools and strategies that we utilize and a training that we created specifically for DSPs to help individuals that we support receive trauma responsive supports and services. And it's a training that I sort of helped facilitate in the practical application component of things. We had spent years and years as an organization sitting in trauma-informed care trainings, going to conferences, doing foundational trainings, online courses, whatever it may be. And the folks that would always sit in those trainings would get super amped and pumped and excited and want to come back and do stuff. And we would have no freaking clue as a provider agency of how to take that stuff that we learn and apply it practically. So we had sort of gone through this journey of how do we practically apply all of that trauma-informed training that we've received. And we created a training called Resilience-Based De-Escalation Training, which is modeled in a similar format to other de-escalation trainings that you may be aware of. There is no physical component to it, but it does help us use the most commonly or practice the most commonly used interventions that are trauma-informed for the individuals that we support, and it provides a practical approach in doing so. So we're just going to dive in a little bit here. Folks online, feel free to shout out questions, raise your hand. Kristen, you're monitoring that, I'm assuming. Awesome. Folks in the room as well, just shout it out. One of the things that we really focus on being a trauma responsive agency and fostering that culture is really being intentional about how we organize and conduct our meetings. Anywhere from staff training to staff meetings to even meetings with family or county board members. And we're always very intentional about being grounded, oriented, and resourced in our space. Taking away all that outside world, I know that we all have rushed in here. The parking lot was packed. I got a sick kiddo at home with a rash. You have to go to an appointment later. We all have all these different things going on, and all of us enter the room in different headspaces, right? And when we do that, oftentimes we're distracted and can't really focus on the here and now. And what grounding, orienting, and resourcing does is it gives us the opportunity to really hit the pause button on the outside world and focus in on what the heck we're doing here today, here in the moment. So there's one activity that I like to do as far as introductions go. But first, I want to talk a little bit about grounding. Grounding is being able to feel where you are physically in space. So oftentimes, if you can sit with your feet on the floor and actually just think about the ground underneath you, the building that's supporting you, the physical environment that you're in, that is a form of grounding. Orienting is orienting yourself to the space. So oftentimes when we do orienting activities, we talk about naming something in this room that helps you feel safe. So for some people, it's, I need to know where my exits are. right? For some people, and I'm one of these people, I need to know what the heck the agenda is for the day. So I know when I get my break, so I can go to the bathroom because I've had so much caffeine. I know when I get to have my lunch break. All those things help me feel calm and safe and oriented in this moment. Other things that people may need to feel safe are to have someone that they know in the room. Someone who looks and sounds like them in the room, especially if they're from a marginalized group. So thinking about folks who come in who may not be ambulatory, oftentimes they may scan that room and look for someone who also is in a wheelchair, right? I felt really safe in high school when there were other kids in my classroom with acne, right? My face was like pepperoni pizza, right? And when I was a junior, and I always felt a little bit safer when I wasn't the only kid all broken out in that classroom, right? So establishing that sense of safety. And then resourcing is the one thing I'm going to ask us to do here, and that is resourcing into something that helps you feel safe, helps you feel comfortable, or is something that you may be looking forward to, or an asset that you may have. So I'm going to go around the room and ask folks in the physical room, and I'm not sure if there are folks online that can do this or not, but we'll kind of figure that out. If you could introduce yourself, the organization that you are representing, and this is hey, welcome. This is my first time in Fairfield County that I'm aware of. So maybe if we could name something that every one of you enjoy about living and or working in Fairfield County. I want to get to know a little bit more about Fairfield County. I will start. My name is Andy Maidlow, and I am the COO of Community Sports Incorporated. And I do not live in Fairfield County, but I do live in Fairfield City in Butler County. So that's a commonality. So what I enjoy about living in Fairfield is we have this amazing, awesome, fabulous grocery store called Jungle Jim's. Is anyone aware?
Yes.
So it's like a theme park, but a grocery store, largest grocery store in the Midwest. I don't know what they say, but they have all these different international sections, right? So they have and so you can get food from all around the world. It's fascinating. They have a huge selection of beer. They have tap nights. They have festivals. So I'm going to the Weekend of Fire in a couple of weeks, which is hot sauce. Vendors from all over the country are coming into this convention space, and we're doing the Weekend of Fire. It's going to be great. So Jungle Jim's, place to check out if you're ever in Fairfield, Ohio, the city, not the county. Let's go around the room. Maybe we could start.
Sure. So my name is Kristen Thorne, and I am the Provider Resource Specialist for the County Board. I have lived in Ohio my whole life. Pickerington, which is this area, I'm pretty new to, about 3 years. But my favorite Mexican restaurant is called La Fogata, and it's right up close to 70, so Hill Road and 70.
Okay.
But it has amazing food. Highly recommend if you are ever here again, or if you have time to visit and try La Fogata.
La Fogata.
Yep.
Sounds fantastic. I would do that for lunch, but I cannot have Mexican food without margaritas, so I'll have to save that.
Hi, my name is Sunny. I work with Learning Never Ends. Excuse me. I don't live in Fairfield County, but one of my favorite chicken joint is called CM Chicken. It's like Korean fried chicken. It's like there's one on Hill Road.
Okay.
Highly recommend. I've got exactly three people hooked so far. Looking for more from the CM Chicken Truthers. So
Great. Awesome. That sounds fantastic. You guys got food. All right.
My name is Austin Hicks. I'm the program development representative for BioQuest. I don't live here in Pickerington either. We have a day program located right behind the Dairy Queen right over there. I'm actually going to go with the place right beside CM Chicken. I've never tried CM Chicken, but
you know where it is.
Oh, I know exactly.
That's the win.
I really enjoy Capriati's, which is the sandwich shop over there. That's got a lot of good options. We have a few, team members that are vegetarian, so they offer, regular stuff and vegetarian options, and it seems to, do well for everybody. So it's
Cool.
a good little spot for us too.
Is that right next to Graders?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, so they're new. Your CM Chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right.
Amazing.
Hi, my name is Cinnamon Edgerton. I work for Beacon Specialized Living, and I am the Regional Vice President for the Supported Living Division. I actually live in Pickerington. I actually live probably 3 minutes away.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of Pickerington is Picktown Palooza. It is the best festival ever, and I can walk to it. So
Oh, when is that?
I think it's in July, like July.
Summer thing?
July,
Cool.
Yeah. So it's
Awesome.
really
I think I probably turned around in your neighborhood when I passed this.
Probably did.
Okay. Awesome.
My name is Kurt Kernan. I'm Community Integration Specialist, or Community Integration Director for Beacon Specialized Living. I don't know too much about Pickerington, but I grew up in Logan, so like I have a healthy relationship with Pickerington in terms of rivalry, because
Okay.
I was there when Katie Smith was there, so.
Uh-huh.
Fairfield County.
Fairfield County.
Yeah, anything about Fairfield
I love
County.
having to go up to River Valley Mall all the time, because it was the closest thing to me to be able to go to a movie.
Awesome.
Yeah, still there.
Cool.
Hello, I'm Kyle Miller. I work for the County Board of DD. I don't live in Fairfield County either, but for the last 9 years almost, have worked here. And there's a couple things that I think are really special about working here is because the county and the city of Lancaster, not so much Pickerington, but the county employees and the city employees just seem to have a really cool relationship where it's like there's almost just a real camaraderie. It's really, really positive and synergetic. But I think one of the most fascinating things to me about Fairfield County is the park system. There's the Lancaster parks and the Fairfield County parks. And there's just so many cool things to do both in Lancaster, main part of the county, and just throughout. It's really, really a neat thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hello, I am Jen Walling, and I'm the MUI Coordinator / Court Liaison for Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities. I too am not from this area. I've lived in Kentucky most of my life, but I've been here about 11 years and lived in Lancaster, Fairfield County the entire time. One of the things that I really like about Fairfield County is the connection to the arts that they have. The Lancaster Festival, the Creative Arts Center, things of that nature. Having a child that was young when we came here and was able to connect her with a lot of those things. So that's what I like about
Awesome.
Fairfield County.
I'm Jamie Rigsby, MUI Coordinator / QA Liaison. For Fairfield County Board of DD. I have lived in Lancaster area pretty much my whole life, well, at least from 10 on. My favorite thing is that all my family is here, so there's that, but the Lancaster Festival is something I was gonna mention. Lancaster's done a lot of awesome work revitalizing their downtown. So that's kind of cool to see some of the stuff that goes on there. There's a brewery there, it's great. And then we were talking about food earlier, and I'm a big Roosters fan.
Oh, me too. Yeah. Grew up city.
All the girls that work there, my daughter works there, so we're kind of like VIPs, at least we like to think we are.
Your daughter works there because you always were there all the
That's
time.
true. It's discounts or like frequent flyers. Also, if you've never had Carol or Shirky's Pizza in Carroll, do it. It's delicious.
Awesome. Do we want to deal folks online or no?
Sure.
How many people we got? Maybe you just shout them out.
Yeah, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and introduce yourself and your favorite thing about Fairfield County, please do. Now's the time. Kelly, I see you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kelly Lemuel, and I'm the president and co-founder for True Care Provider Services. We are located in Southwest Ohio. We currently are making our way up north and becoming a part of the Franklin County as well to provide remote supports. Very excited to be here today. And Andy is from our part of the state, so we are also based in Cincinnati as well. So Andy, it's very exciting to see you there. I'm excited for this training. I live in Lebanon, Ohio, and so that's home to the Golden Lamb restaurant, which is a historic restaurant and hotel where many presidents have stayed in the past, and it's just an amazing place with amazing food. They added on a tavern several years ago to the back of it, and it's the food is just incredible. So anytime you're in Southwest Ohio, definitely plan a trip to the Golden Lamb. You'll love it.
I can speak to that, Kelly. I was at that tavern 2 Fridays ago. What's the name of it?
Yes.
What's it called again?
The
It's
Black
not-
Horse Tavern,
Black
I
Horse
think.
Tavern. Yeah.
Yeah, so good. Oh, so good.
That's an elevated happy hour experience for sure.
Totally, yes.
Thanks, Kelly.
Nice.
Thank you. Good to see you, Andy.
Good to see you.
Matt, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, good morning. I too, I'm from the Blue Ash, Ohio area. I have to admit, Andy, you lost me. I'm still stuck on the Weekend of Fire. I've got to look into that. I hope there's openings.
Like their Facebook, it's all up on it.
Okay, it sounded really good. So speaking of that, I guess one of my comfort foods is Skyline Chili. I think one of the things I'm a new person to True Care, but I think my favorite thing about coming in is the staff, working with the people here,
Cool.
the energy of the organization. So we look forward to growing in Fairfield County as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, you from Cincinnati and you get a Skyline craving. There's nothing else that's going to hit that without Skyline. Anyone else?
Anybody else? Josh?
Sure, I'll go. I'm Josh Cook. I know a handful of people from Fairfield County. I've worked with you guys in the past, but I'm excited to be back at these meetings. I work at ARC Industries. We're mostly in Franklin County and looking to kind of see where else we can meet some needs. I'm from Columbus and grew up in Westerville, so pretty familiar with that area. A favorite food, if you're in the Columbus area, definitely stop by Los Guachos Tacos. They do al pastor tacos on the giant spit, and it is very, very good.
Sounds awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
I know, right?
Dude, so much
Lunch.
food. Alrighty.
We get everyone?
I don't see anybody else.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll plug away. That's very intentional. Okay. So that took maybe 10 minutes. But when we talk about building a culture that is trauma responsive, the important thing is that everyone in that room has a connection with somebody else, and everyone in the room has a sense of what we call felt safety. All right. So our brains and limbic system, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, needs to feel safe in order to be able to think collaboratively, to work with other people, and to have what we call spontaneous speech, which is conversational speech. You ask me a question, I can think about it, I can answer your question, and we can build together, right? In order to be able to do that, we have to feel safe with the folks around us in the room. And one of those things that we can do is just a simple check-in. I've got a bunch of different questions. Sometimes I ask, what are we going to do on our next day off? Sometimes 4th of July is coming up. Hey, what's the next big holiday? What are our plans? What are the last vacation? Whatever it may be. And then you're building that sense of cooperation and co-regulation together, right? So that's something that we do very intentionally. Regardless of the type of meeting we're going to do, we always try to do something with regards to either grounding, orienting, and or resourcing. Okay, and I'm going to be patient. Oh, boo. I don't know what happened. Maybe just click over.
Why is mine not even working?
Oh, no. Is it frozen? Bear with us. Yay. Okay, so who we are, we talked about this already. We're Community Sports Incorporated, just celebrated 25 years of service in Hamilton County. We are a single location, so we do not have, we have not expanded or, we thought about that, but really what we're doing is we're very intentional about the services that we provide in Hamilton County. We've expanded from supported living to remote supports to money management to nursing and transportation services. Been around 25 years. We've served anywhere from 120 to 100 to, it varies. And then we serve folks in a money management capacity of about 200 folks in Hamilton County exclusively for money management, because that is a big need in Hamilton County. So that's who we are. I don't know. Okay. Ooh. Okay. Maybe just the next one would be
touchy.
Oh God.
Get it,
Okay.
get it.
So I talked about this is okay. So it's important whenever we are thinking about new concepts. Every time we talk about trauma-informed care, a third of the room is really pumped. A third of the room is thinking, I've heard about this before. And a third is super skeptical because, hey, I've trauma-informed this, trauma-informed that, right? We invite everyone who comes to one of our trainings to what we call lean in with curiosity. If we could just be curious throughout the morning with what we are talking about and the concepts and wonder about what would it look like if we tried this. let's just be curious with some of that information that we're going to go over today and think about how maybe we could apply this to one person, to one scenario, to one employee, and just keeping that person in mind. When we lean out or we say a hard yes or a hard no to something, what we're doing is we're actually closing off our brain to being willing to learn. So our ask is that you always just lean in and be curious about what we're going to talk about today. Oh, yes. And we're going to talk a little bit about our journey from becoming trauma competent to trauma informed to trauma responsive. These are fluid terms, okay, and maybe they're slightly made up on my end. But the way I'm considering our journey is back before 2015, we were what we considered to be trauma competent. Okay, so what that means is at Community Supports, we have always had the luxury of employing our own behavior support specialist, right? So we had a behavior support specialist at Community Supports Incorporated that worked in collaboration with the behavior specialist of the county. The reason we did that is we served a very high amount of people on our caseload as an agency of folks who had restrictive measures, who needed behavior support services and things like that. So it was advantageous for us to hire a behavior support specialist. And because of that, you know, we were a little bit ahead of the curve prior to 2015 with some of the best practices around behavior support services because we had to be. And one of those best practices was implementing some trauma-informed interventions here and there when they got sprinkled in. So what that means is if someone from the county board or Mary Vicario, if anyone's familiar with her and her work, or Sarah Buffy conducted what's called a trauma-informed biographical timeline and created interventions around that, we could implement those when we're taught them, right? So that's becoming trauma competent. We can competently provide these interventions in a way that is somewhat semi-successful, okay? Beyond that, we move into trauma informed, which is us being able to take that information that we're receiving and actually implement it in a best practice way and think creatively rather than just doing rote implementation of something we learned from the outside. That's trauma informed. That's really great, right? That's us going to the trainings and coming back and wondering how the heck we implement it, and maybe we do, maybe we don't. But we're informed that there is this trauma responsive type of support that is out there that is going to help build resilience for the individuals that we support and our staff, and we are interested in it, and we're going to implement it to the best of our ability. Trauma responsive is us changing the culture and approach of our agency from top to bottom, right? Trauma responsive is living and breathing the interventions that we are going to talk about in a little bit in a way that you can't turn it off when you go home. You predict, practice, and plan B with your kids. You predict, practice, plan B with yourself as you're driving in, trying to find where the heck this place is, right? You reflect on or connect and you can't turn it off. You can't turn it off, right? And so being trauma responsive is how do we answer the phone differently when somebody calls us? How do we handle our on-call differently? How do we create a trauma responsive med administration training? How do we create a trauma responsive MUI training? Right. And it's very much in the core concepts of what we're talking about right here, which is grounding, orienting, and resourcing, different things like that, that we're very intentional about welcoming people and making them feel safe so that we can learn. It doesn't matter what the material is. If we don't feel safe in our environment, we can't learn. So that is our trauma responsive sort of level that we are in, as far as our journey goes. So going back a little bit about how we became trauma responsive, we got a panicky phone call from someone at Hamilton County on a random Tuesday in 2015 saying, hey, there's this grant out there. We thought you guys might be perfect for it. It's called Building Capacity for Trauma-Informed Care that's being offered through DODD. How would you guys feel about applying for that grant? Why? Because we're from Hamilton County, probably, and someone from the county board thought it'd be a good idea if someone in Hamilton County got this grant, right? So we're like, great, we'll do this. We have no idea what we're doing. We're going to dip our toe in or we're going to jump in. We're like, you know what? If we're applying for a grant, we're going all in. We're waving our magic wand. We're looking at the blue sky and saying, here's our ask, right? And we're just going to go after it. So when we applied for this grant, we had about 5 days to put this thing together. We threw it up to the state, and what we figured out the state was asking of us is, if you guys get this money, and you get this grant, how many people can you take out of the developmental center successfully and serve them in a supported living capacity? And we made up a number, and the number was not realistic. We didn't know at the time, right? Because we didn't know all that goes into building that capacity to be able to support. We've served plenty of folks coming out of developmental centers in the past, right? We currently serve a bunch of folks who are in our developmental centers, but to build that capacity, what we figured by the time our grant was over is the state asked the right question, but in the wrong way. The right question was, hey, how many folks can you as a provider agency support safely in the community if we can help you build their resilience and allow them to be safe and not come back to the developmental center? But you can't put that on a provider. You have to put that on the whole network of providers, right? So when we completed our grant process, we've really made it our mission to talk to anyone who's willing and able to listen about here's our journey that we've been through. We've gone through some bumps and bruises and oopses and ouches throughout the way. That has helped other agencies avoid that and kind of learn from our mistakes and become trauma responsive as well, because what the state is asking is correct. We want to serve people in the least restrictive capacity. We believe that building trauma responsive organizations is the way to do it. But the challenge is, how do we do it without awarding grants everywhere, because there's no money to do that, right? And how do we take what we learned with this grant and apply it and offer it to other agencies that don't have the luxury of having a grant? How can we do something that's the best practice now to help us become trauma responsive? So we went all in on that ask, and we changed that behavior support specialist role to a trauma responsive support person. We also were able to utilize that grant and hire someone from our program coordinator pool, which program coordinator is like our caseworker, whatever you may call it at your organization, and help her as well. So we had partners in this process. And once we selected those folks, we went through an intensive training series with, is anyone familiar with Finding Hope Consulting, Mary Vicario, and some of her work? She is a trauma consulting agency in Hamilton County as well. And we went through her 2-day foundational training, which gives us those core concepts of trauma-informed care, and then an extended theory to practice a series, which is offered through the Tri-State Trauma Network to anybody who's willing to sit through it. But we've got that exclusively with them, and we're able to sort of really take that. And our charge was to take that information that we were learning from an outside consultant, and how do we make it our own, and how do we practically apply all the stuff that we're learning. So we went through a good 6-month period of them going through these trainings, and that's not really changing shit, right? Like, we were just learning, and people were coming up to us and were like, well, what are they doing in there? When are we gonna, I'm like, well, we're gonna get this comfort level first before we go out and approach and change the way we're training and things like that. One of the things that we immediately learned right off the bat was folks going through trauma responsive care certification and that theory to practice, when they are in this field, experience their own trauma and are reliving their own trauma when they're going through this. So we had to hit the pause button, stop that training, create our own what's called self-care. Okay, everyone's talking about self-care anymore. That's fine. But we had to create our own self-care training, because what we realized was, if we are not in a good headspace for us as a learner, we're going to be triggered by some of the information that we're learning. And then we're not going to feel safe in that environment. And we're going to be dealing with our own trauma rather than the trauma of the individuals that we're supporting. So we had to pause that and really develop what's called a self-care training, very intentional for the staff at Community Sports Incorporated. The very first training we've ever designed, where people are actually asking, when is it my turn to sit in this training, right? So we had about 120 staff at the time. We like to have trainings about the size of this room. So maybe we train 15 to 20 people at a time. So we would go through a month or so of these trainings. People would sign up. People not excited about coming to MUI training, no disrespect, right? No one is excited about coming into CPR or med administration or all these. The first time anyone was ever excited about coming to a training was the self-care training, because, we did a couple, word kind of spread. People would call up, when's it my turn to do this training, right? And so we're like, okay, well, no, we got them. right? The approach is different. The way we set up the room was different. And talking about, it's all about you turning off and engaging for yourself, and some strategies that we can do to help build resilience within us. Because it's like the adage of when you're on that plane and the oxygen mask comes down, you're supposed to put it on yourself before you help a child. Same thing here, right? So we need to be able to do that. So we developed self-care training around that. And then we also went through a trauma-informed biographical timeline cohort series so that we can create and implement our own trauma-informed biographical timelines, which out of that timeline, we have what's called the resilience-based plan, which are the interventions that we are trauma responsive, intended to build resilience for the individuals that we support. Now, just show of hands, I don't want to assume anything. Who here is familiar with what a trauma-informed biographical timeline is?
I've been part of the cohort.
Couple. You've been in the cohort?
Yeah, I was
Which one? You were with me. Welcome back. Sorry you have to listen to me again.
No worries.
Okay, so a brief synopsis of what a trauma-informed biographical timeline is. Okay, it's a lived experience of someone's life. So what we do, we get a big piece of butcher block paper that usually expands the length of this wall here. And we hash off every year of an individual's life. You start with in utero. You draw a big black line right down the center of that. And as you go through year by year of an individual's life, you put the resilience and experiences that individuals had that's given them a leg up in life, that have been safe, that have been positive above the line in that individual's favorite color at when it's that time of their life. And then in red below that line, you put any adverse childhood experiences, which is called ACEs, or compounding adverse toxic stressors, which are CATs, below that line. Anything that was a disadvantage or led to unsafe actions or disadvantages were below that line in red. And what you do by the time you complete that experience is you have someone's entire life out on paper. The resilience and the negative and up and down, and it's really a lived experience. And as we do that, we name at the end of that experience how we are personally feeling, having lived that individual's life for the morning, the afternoon, whatever it may be. And we do that very intentionally because by naming how we're actually feeling, we're actually identifying how they were feeling. In our brains, we have what's called mirror neurons. Okay, so in our neurotypical brains, we have mirror neurons, which allows us to actually feel what other people are feeling, having lived the same experience. This is why Hollywood is so successful, right? Around Halloween time, you're watching that movie and you're watching the lady run from the axe murderer, and you're actually feeling the feelings that that character on the screen is feeling, right? You're feeling that in your body. Having done those timelines, you're actually feeling what that individual has felt at some point in their life. We also have to name how we're personally feeling to engage our cortex and be creative in creating a trauma responsive plan, which is what it's all about. What we try to do is find all that red. If there's not a favorite color that contradicts that red for resilience, then we have to build an intervention around it so we can build resilience, right? So that trauma-informed biographical timeline is a critical piece to helping build resilience on the individual level. We went through a timeline cohort to be able to conduct those timelines independently, which was a big part of our journey. Does anyone have any questions about any of this? This was 2016, okay. Since then, we've really built into, we've really remodeled essentially everything that we do, from how we answer our phones to how we actually deal with on-call. One of the experiences that we were having right at the time that this occurred, and we were trying to, become trauma-informed, become trauma responsive, was we had an incident on a Saturday where staff needed to call 911, and they needed to do the choke, the Heimlich maneuver thing, and call 911 and went to the hospital. And of course, all the administrators, everyone's, concerned. We're at University Hospital. We're thinking about what's going on. We're trying to figure out, is this individual okay? Did we do the right thing? Is everything fine? Everything turned out to be fine, but all the focus was on that individual, right? We found out on Monday, it's Monday afternoon, no one's followed up with the staff who was in a life and death situation, right? And it was a blind spot that we had as an agency of, if we're not intentional about reaching out, then These people are living with vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, and we're not doing anything to help that staff person. And it was a very kind of eye-opening moment for us to experience something like that, where how do we put something in place to know that it's just as important to reach out to that staff person as it is to contact the family member of the individual who's choking, to make sure they're okay, to make sure we're following doctor's orders and things like that. And that just happened at the most opportune time for us to really sit down, dissect, and think about, now we have a very intentional debriefing form for all of these critical incidents that occur to staff. Are you okay? What do you need? How can we help you feel safe? What's going to help you feel safe walking in that door? Think about, like, you just went through that whole journey of conducting the Heimlich maneuver, calling 911 and all this. And then your next shift, you're showing up. What's that feeling you're going to get when you walk through that door to work one-on-one with that individual again, right? How can we help you feel safe enough to do that? Those type of things, we really analyzed how we do that. We analyzed what it was like for a staff person to call off. Call offs suck, right, on the weekend, especially when you have the person who's on call receiving that phone call may be the one who has to go in and work the shift, right? So we've had some very unsafe interactions with staff people calling off in the past. And do people take advantage? I don't know, maybe, right? But we always take it from the perspective of believe the person calling, right? So they're calling in because, you know, we have wonderful staff people, but kids get sick, tires get flat, you know, all this stuff happens, right? And so really being more compassionate about and intentional about, hey, how do we handle call-offs, things like that. So really, we just really analyze each and every little component of how we do business and focus through a trauma responsive lens, and how can we make it feel safer for our staff. What is trauma, right? So I'm typing up this PowerPoint yesterday, and I realized I haven't defined trauma anywhere. So I threw this slide in. Our most recent common current definition of trauma, I threw Sarah Buffy up here. Two things that happen too much, too fast, or too soon can be a definition of what trauma is, okay? Thinking about that in our own lives, what are things that are just too much, or might be happening too fast, that's something that we're not ready for, or too soon at a time where we're not ready for it to occur. That is a good working definition of trauma. It's kind of what we utilize right now. So what we learned throughout our entire journey of becoming trauma responsive is that the impact of trauma affects absolutely everyone in our organization. There is no one that works at community supports or your agency or anyone who receives services from your agency or community supports that has not had some level of trauma in their lives. And it's important to identify, and they don't have to identify that for us, but it's important to own the fact that we know that people's lived experiences affect how they view the world and how they view their jobs. The focus of it's not what is wrong with us, it's what's happened to us, is really that change in focus of, hey, it's not what's wrong with the individual we're supporting, it's what's happened to them in the past for them to feel like they have to engage in something that's unsafe. Today's unsafe action was yesterday's survival skill and strategy, right? So if my unsafe action right now is I'm hoarding food, my survival strategy 5 years ago, before I was receiving supports for y'all, may have been I needed to hoard food because there's food insecurity in our home, right? And how do we build resilience within that person's brain to help them feel safe enough to know that I don't need to hoard food anymore because I'm safe enough and I'm with safe people to be able to do that. If we can't build that resilience, then attacking that unsafe action down here isn't going to do much. Attacking it up here with how do we build resilience and help you feel safe enough so that you don't feel that you have to hoard food, that you don't feel that you have to self-injure. That is really the intent of that trauma responsiveness. And knowing someone's past trauma, we can help create interventions around it that's targeted specifically at what they may be lacking. But absolutely affects everyone in our organization. The impact of trauma of raising a child with a developmental disability, right? Difficult parents, right? We've got those. We either have parents who are absent, right? are the ones who are calling because they wore shorts and it was only 68 degrees, right? And there's not a whole lot, but realizing that the lived experience of family members who have raised or been a sibling of someone with a developmental disability is changing our focus and our perspective of, hey, just living a life, living the day in their shoes, right? And seeing where their perspective is. Is it frustrating sometimes for us as a program coordinator or as a director? Yeah, it could be, but realizing where they're coming from and that they are doing what they needed to do to help that individual survive to get to where we are today, right? How do we celebrate the fact of you did what you needed to do to help your individual survive? You did what you needed to do for you to survive. How can we help you feel safe enough to know that you don't need to continue to do those things in order to be safe with us, right? And so that's really about how we can build those connections. I talked a little about self-care. Secondary trauma is real and we must take time for self-care. So again, we did design a training around self-care, but it's not really just a training. It's knowing a little bit about each staff person and maybe what helps them feel safe or helps them feel unsafe. We are intentional about how we pair individuals that need services with staff. If they have a similar trauma history, it's something that we want to look at and address, right? Because we could have individuals and staff triggering each other around and around and around, right? So that's something that we definitely want to focus on. And we take all of that lived trauma into consideration.
How do you find out that information?
Well, now, here's the thing, you don't. What's surprising, though, is that once staff begin to feel safe in an environment, then more information can be disclosed. It's amazing when we do these self-care, what people are saying, you know what I mean? We're not counselors and not therapists, right? So we will direct you to the supports that you need. But when people feel safe enough to disclose information, it's pretty surprising. And we've had staff come to us saying, you know, I don't need to name my trauma, but I can tell you right now, the trauma and lived experience of the individual I'm working with is impacting me. And that's all you have to say. Great, how can we work around that, right? So it's just a factor. It's a factor in how do we help staff feel safe with individuals they support. And that trauma history, if there's that conflict there, it's something that oftentimes will come up and that we'll work to address. Great question, though. We don't slap a piece of paper in front of people and say, name your trauma. Okay, we don't do that. Okay, so we learned that increasing the awareness of the impact of trauma in the lives of the people we serve. Those trauma-informed biographical timelines are extremely important with regards to not only learning someone's lived experience, but building empathy. For everyone that we've done a trauma-informed biographical timeline for, when staff sit in those timelines and they see, this isn't about me, right? This unsafe behavior that I'm seeing every day when I walk in the door isn't because of me. It's because of this red over here at H2, right? It's because of whatever it may be, and it's not personal. And it helps build empathy, and it actually has helped with the teams of people that serve the most challenging individuals from like the turnover. That's a question I get all the time. Turnover. We don't have any staff either, right? I mean, you all know what's going on. But what we do have is less turnover with working with individuals who need the most support. Because if we can build that empathy and that sort of understanding of, wow, look at all the people that have come in and out of that individual's life. I don't want to be a red. I want to be a blue, or whatever their favorite color is at the top. How can we do that, right? We do timelines in our developmental centers, and it's amazing. We'll have adults we did a timeline at Gallipolis where I think this individual had been there like 15 years or something like that. Staff been working with them for 12, 15 years. They come up during the break. They're like, I knew all this stuff, but I didn't see all of this stuff that happened chronologically, and it really has an impact. And so learning an individual's trauma history and what their lived experience is in order to have survived up until this point is something that we encourage all of our staff to digest and understand so that they can have that empathy in supporting the individuals that we support, not only in the why behind interventions, but all the information together. Yes, sir.
So how do you build those for people you may not have all that information on?
How do you build a timeline? Okay, so a couple of different things. Number one, we can't always do a timeline for everyone. We don't always have that information, but what we also will do is not shy away from timelines that have gaps. So there may be significant gaps in history, and we do a lot of what we call respectful guessing. And the reason we call that respectful guessing is because whatever we put on that trauma-informed biographical timeline doesn't need to be defended in a court of law. What it needs to do is we always put information on that timeline. It's not unfortunately, it's just real, of the worst case scenarios, because you can't overdose on the interventions that we're going to put in that trauma responsive plan. So we always respectfully guess to the err on the side of trauma. Right. Also, it's kind of amazing. We don't jump in and do timelines like, hey, here's your intake packet. Welcome to community sports, and your timeline is scheduled next week. Right. We try to build that sense of felt safety with family, with the individuals, whoever it may be, so that they can feel safe enough to disclose. It's amazing the amount of information people are willing to disclose to you when they feel safe enough to do it. And that we're coming up from the standpoint of we want to build resilience. Right. And we're not going to blame and shame. We're going to own the fact that there's red, and how do we add the blue, right, to all those things. So that's a great question, but we try not to shy away. It's amazing where there are times where like kiddos will go to like NECO, or they'll go to, wherever institutionally, and there's nothing there. I'm like, dude, right? I don't know. So whatever. So, but however we can increase the awareness of the impact of trauma that individuals have had in their lives, the more impactful we're going to be. We learned a little bit. We talked about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and CAS, complicating adverse toxic stressors. There are 15 of those in total that are tabulated. And I didn't write them all out, but essentially what we talk about with ACEs are different types of abuse, food insecurity, loss of a parent, parent incarcerated. Those are some of the common ones. And then CATs are around more environmentally. So living in a community with community violence, having a developmental disability is a CAT in and of itself. So those are tabulated, and what we do is we tabulate ACEs and CATs, come up with a formula, and then we have what's called a resilience score, where we take all those ACEs and CATs, but we also see what resilience has that individual developed over the years to counteract some of those. My ex-wife we don't do this, by the way. We went to a Mexican restaurant one night, and it was after one of a timeline we did, and she was talking about these ACEs. What's up with these ACEs? So I'm like, I'm bringing it with me. We're going to do this, right? So we bring our ACE assessment. She's sitting there. She's like, I'm a 9. And she's like, how come I'm a 9 and I went to college, have a career, have kids, and do this thing, and live in a house, and the people that I grew up with in Madisonville have a 9 and their lives are shit. Like, what's the difference? Well, then we whip out this resilience score. Did you have a positive, safe adult in your life? Did you have a safe connection at school? All these questions. And it turns out she had 9 resilience factors to counteract those 9 ACEs, right? So what we can't get rid of ACEs and CATs that have happened to people, but we can build resilience against it. And that's where all of our interventions come into play, is identify those CATs, build resilience against the CATs that don't have resilience built against it. And that's really the whole point of the thing. Okay, so about resilience factors, the resilience we have and that's terrible. So we can actually develop interventions that heal the part of the brain that has been impacted by trauma. We're attacking the limbic system. All right, it's the most able to be regrown and healed. All of our, there's neuroscience behind this, and I don't teach any neuroscience, right? Because I'm about practical application. So if you want me to come up here and do a neuroscience lecture, it will not happen, but just know whatever I talk about, there's neuroscience that backs it up. All right. And then I'll get to the footnotes later. But resilience is about actually healing neural pathways in our brain. And it's really kind of amazing to think about, like, some of the interventions that we do can actually heal the brain and make us feel safe in environments where we historically have not been safe. All right. So we also learned about what our top 5 resilience factors are, right? So these are factors that will help build resilience for folks who've experienced trauma, or any of us, right? And I didn't define a ton of these, but I just named them. Agency, which is the ability to have agency within your own life and choices within your own life, and the freedom to be able to get up and walk out of here if I need to, right? Self-esteem, affiliation, which is valued social roles, things like that, where I am actually affiliated with organizations and groups of people that value me. External supports. So those could be things like us, but they could be things like a next door neighbor. They could be things like family members. And then positive, safe adults in an individual's life. Oftentimes we'll name that 5th resilience factor as you, because we are the positive, safe adults who are within all the individuals that we support. Okay. We can increase knowledge of trauma-informed care. Okay, so we do a robust TIC training for all of our staff. It's called, again, resilience-based de-escalation training. It's this thing, right? It's a big manual. We do, again, it focuses on what's called our felt safety manual, which is the most commonly used trauma-responsive interventions. And we practice them and how we can apply them, first up for ourselves, and then for individuals that we support. That's a day-long training. And then we recertify every year. And then, again, we talked about this a little bit, but building a sense of understanding and empathy by conducting trauma-informed biographical timelines and those trauma-responsive plans for the individuals we support. We do our damnedest to get those in the ISP, but now it's an Ohio ISP, so who the hell knows what's going to happen. All right. Outcomes. So a lot of questions around, well, you went through this whole journey to become trauma responsive. What the heck? Do you have any numbers or whatever? And yesterday afternoon, here's what I could come up with. So in 2014, before we went on our trauma responsive care journey, we had 12 individuals with restrictive measures in their ISP, and today we have 3. In 2014, we had 40 MUIs, and last year we had 15. And in 2014, we served 4 individuals with at least 2-to-1 staffing 24/7. And we are down to one individual requiring 2-to-1 staffing in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. So we were able to decrease all of these restrictions by increasing resilience, right? And so this is some long game work. A lot of these interventions that we're going to talk about in a few minutes don't have an immediate impact. You'll try it once and say it doesn't work. Right? It takes 6 months to build a new neural network in our brain, under perfect circumstances, right? So under the perfect circumstances, my brain can be healed if I have a consistent intervention applied to me for 6 straight months, right? And we know that best case scenario, maybe we're hitting 50%, so let's double it, right? So maybe it's a year, right? So this is long game work, but absolutely. This can be done, right? So that's what we've learned over the last however long, how many years is that? 9, 8, whatever, that's a few years. All right, so how are we at Community Supports helping other organizations? Right now, we're the contract agency assisting all of our developmental centers with becoming trauma responsive. So we have been on a journey since 2019. It was supposed to stop and it's never stopping. Where we're doing exactly what we did at Community Supports and applying it to all 600, however many employees it is at our developmental centers. Mayor Vicario and all folks are going through our theory to practice. And then I come in where the practical application comes in. It's like, how all this stuff that you're learning, how do you apply it to the developmental centers? Developmental centers are very different in that they're union. They're this, they're that, they're the other thing, right? And so like they have all these different stumbling blocks that we have been navigating since 2019. But we're in collaboration of doing some of that practical application work. We are conducting trauma-informed biographical timelines for each of our developmental centers. And we're really targeting Tiffin right now because every youth that comes in is getting a timeline conducted by us. And then I collaborate with different consulting agencies. Finding Health Consulting is Mary Vicario's outfit. Been working with her for a number of years. And then Solberg Consulting is Sarah Buffy. Anyone else familiar with Sarah Buffy's work? Awesome. We do a lot of collaborative work with, and then Danae Riggs is with Humans Being Human Consulting, which is new. We do a lot of work together, and it provides, and she helps me with the resilience-based de-escalation training when we do it externally, because what she does is nothing what I do, right? So I'm in the DD world and she is in the resilience world, and the way it works is that we collaborate and try to become as trauma responsive for our audience as possible. Southwest Ohio COG, we have a youth respite home project, which is a step down from our developmental centers for our youth who are living in that Southwest Ohio COG. And they receive sort of step down youth respite support. And then we also offer that resilience-based de-escalation training as well. So these are some of those things that we talked about when our grant ended. Hey, what are y'all going to do? You're going to take this many people out of developmental centers, but you didn't do it. Well, yeah, that's true. So here's what we can do. We need to expand that network of provider agencies who are willing to become trauma responsive, because the only way we're going to decrease our census at our developmental centers and increase resilience for folks living in the community in a supported living capacity, at least, is to expand the network of provider agencies that are trauma responsive. Community supports can't take nobody. All right, we have like no staff. So like, please don't refer people to us. But we can work to spread the word, and that's really what our mission is anymore. Awesome. So understanding the essentials of becoming a trauma responsive organization. I'm assuming no one was at the Trauma Informed Care Conference, Ohio Children's Alliance last week. No. Good, because I just regurgitated the whole thing, so you all probably could have left. So within our resilience-based de-escalation training, we created what's called the Felt Safety Manual. The Felt Safety Manual was kind of born out of COVID. So we, like I said, we were conducting these theory to practice trainings with our developmental centers. We're all congregated once a month. Everyone was getting together. It's about 80 of us. It was really great. And then pause, we hit COVID. And then people were reaching out to us saying, hey, we've gotten like 3 months of a year's worth of training and this is great, but how do we apply any of this crap? Like, we don't know what we're doing, right? And so we just kind of sat there and I drew up a map of the most commonly used interventions to become trauma responsive or provide trauma responsive interventions to individuals, and kind of showed how they were related, right? And how they interplayed with each other. If you have no other starting point, and you want to help build resilience for an individual that we're supporting, we can refer to the Felt Safety Manual and sort of just go step by step by step and work through different interventions and tools. And if you know nothing else about that individual, then we're going to find out by going through the Felt Safety Manual. So it kind of was here's what we can do in the meantime until we can dive in further and do timelines again and things like that. So I'm going to define the difference between felt safety and actual safety. So again, felt safety is feeling safe in your environment. You can feel safe and not actually be safe, or vice versa. You can actually be perfectly safe but not feel safe. I always say, like, first day at a new job, first day at a new school, right? You could be perfectly safe in the physical environment, but everything your body is telling you is, hell no, I'm not safe. I don't know where I don't know these people. I don't know where I'm supposed to go, all these things, right? So feeling safe in your body is different than actually being safe. And that's really kind of the first tenement of understanding what it is to become trauma responsive. I will breeze through that real fast. So now I want to talk a little bit about what are some of these things that we're doing for our staff to help take the neuroscience and break it down into practical application. Okay, the slide I just skipped over was real simple. It's if we could do one thing right now in this moment to become more trauma responsive, it would be to remove evaluative praise and replace it with safe and unsafe. So when I talk about evaluative, I'm talking about appropriate and inappropriate. You're being inappropriate right now, right? Replacing inappropriate with unsafe. You're actually being unsafe right now, right? Or you're being, because appropriate and inappropriate could mean different. I get 3 shifts of staff working with me every day, and their opinion about what's appropriate is vastly different. And I don't know how I'm going to feel safe, right? But if I can equate safe and unsafe, what you're doing right now is safe, what I'm doing right now is unsafe, my brain, it's actually very calming to my brain because I can put an evaluative term to safe and unsafe, right? So if we can remove good, bad, appropriate, inappropriate, healthy, unhealthy with safe and unsafe, and just use that terminology and use it consistently, it's going to establish that sense of felt safety in whoever's hearing it, right? Because it's not your opinion about what's good and bad, it's your opinion about what's safe and unsafe, and that should just be universal, right? And then I get that internal locus of control where I understand, hey, now I know I'm not being inappropriate or bad, I'm being unsafe, and I need to do what I need to do to be able to feel safe. Man, I'm going fast. All right. So one of the tools that we use is kind of the cornerstone of understanding the neuroscience of how all of our brains work and how they help us, our brains judge if we're safe or unsafe, is broken down to this tool called the hand brain. So this is the work of Dan Siegel. My mentor, Mary Vicario, taught me this version. You can Google Dan Siegel's hand brain, find YouTube videos all over the place of different ways to do it. But we always start with what is that hand brain and how does that apply, right? So I want to briefly teach the hand brain to you guys because it's something that we can all digest. It takes all that neuroscience and makes it simple for someone like me to understand who got a D in chemistry and just try to get through, right? So it really helps us understand where our brains are when we're feeling unsafe and where we plug in certain interventions based on what our brains are telling us, right? So our brain, this model works for anyone with a central nervous system and a spinal cord, which is all of us, right? So it doesn't matter if it's staff or individuals receiving support or the guy down the street. This hand brain is a model of figuring out where we are in the moment, okay? So I'm just gonna go through this. There's a bunch of slides, but I don't know if I'm gonna keep up or not. So if our hand was a brain, this is a model, right? So from my wrist to my elbow, this whole thing right here in real life is my spinal cord, which goes from the base of my brain all the way down to my rear end. In there is housed what's called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve actually goes down your spinal cord and wraps around and attaches to every organ in your body. The vagus nerve is what actually allows us to feel our feelings in our body. We don't feel our feelings up here. We feel them down here, right? I went up to Michigan to visit my grandma in the nursing home. I'm not trying to get credit, but I was coming back on Sunday and I was driving well over the 85. I don't know. I was going pretty fast, right? And then there's a weigh station. They shouldn't even be allowed to do this. There's a weigh station, right? And there's a state officer right there. And I didn't use Waze. Usually I use Waze because they tell you where the police are, but I use maps. So I'm driving down 75 and I'm like literally passing this cop, right? And then I see right? And the feeling you get right here, right, is the feeling. You can't control that feeling. Your body is telling you, I ain't feeling safe, right? They pulled over the dude next to me. He must have been going 87 and I was going 85, right? But he was behind me. And so like you're getting these feelings, right? When you ride roller coaster, you go up the thing. That's the music park industry is living on your vagus nerve, right? You get that feeling of being unsafe. The butterflies you get before you public speak, whatever it is, that's that vagus nerve doing its job. It's actually allowing us to feel our feelings in our body, right? That vagus nerve is attached to our brainstem, which is represented by the palm of our hand. In real life, it's boom right down here. And that is, the brainstem is in charge of all the things that we don't want to have to think about. Breathing, digestion, hunger, all of those things live in our brainstem. All right, this is also where our information is coming in from the outside world. It's going into our brainstem. And that information is being presented to our limbic system, which is represented by the thumb in my hand brain. In real life, if you have Frankenstein bolts where they connect right in the middle, would be that limbic system. That is where all of our interventions are focused. So our limbic system is in charge of three very important things: felt safety, attachment, and regulation. So I talked a little bit about felt safety before, right? So felt safety is actually feeling safe. Based on the information that's coming into that limbic system, is the external information that I'm receiving. Am I feeling safe based on the information I'm getting? If yes, great. If not, then we're going to get our cortex offline. But the limbic system instantaneously decides based on the information that I'm receiving, am I safe or unsafe? It can't decide. It always errs on this side of unsafe. Okay. Attachment. We need to feel safe to be able to attach and work cooperatively with other people. So in the first year of life, you need that felt safety before you can attach, before you can regulate. So felt safety, attachment, and regulation. We need to feel safe and be attached to the people in our environment so we can regulate. What is regulate? Being calm, cool, collected. Right now, we're all regulated, right? We all have felt safety, attachment, regulation in this room right now. Otherwise, we know it. Someone who doesn't feel regulated, you know what that's about, right? Sometimes it results in unsafe action, fidgety and whatever, not being able to learn. So that information that comes in through that brainstem and presented to that limbic system, if that limbic system is saying, yeah, everything's cool, I'm feeling safe, only then will our cortex, which is represented by our 4 fingers here in our hand-brain model, what we say come online and engage. That cortex in real life is all that outside part of your brain. And it's what makes us us, right? So it is what allows us to work cooperatively with other people. It's what allows us to engage and be creative and be who we are and have what's called that conversational speed, right? If we're not feeling safe, that cortex goes completely offline and we're operating from the downstairs part of our brain, which is also known as our fear center. We're not feeling safe. We're not thinking, we're acting. Right. So when our cortex is offline, we have interventions that we design in that felt safety manual to get the cortex back online. One thing you can't do when your cortex is offline is say, use your words. Right. Nope.
Calm down.
Calm down. Right. Comply, whatever it may be. No, I'm not thinking rationally. Right. I need to get this thinking brain back online before I can have a conversation with you. Right. Other interventions where we attack that cortex from going offline in historical situations where they have gone offline, doctor's appointments, first day of school, all these things that have historically maybe had us feel unsafe. We can come up with interventions to try to keep that cortex online when historically we haven't felt safe. This brainstem blocks out 97% of the information in a neurotypical person that we're receiving, right? Which thank goodness for that, because like I said before, that limbic system, if it can't decide safe or unsafe, is going to err on unsafe, and too much information is going to lead to unsafe, right? But for people with complex trauma or people on the autistic spectrum, that brainstem actually is widened. And it's not blocking out 97% information. It's letting a lot more information through to that limbic system, which more often than not may throw that cortex offline when you and I are feeling safe, right? So if I've had complex trauma or I'm on that autistic spectrum, sometimes my environment may be triggering me where it may not be triggering you, right? So for someone with autism, sometimes lights are too bright, sounds are too loud, right? Clothing is uncomfortable, we're itchy, we're whatever. That's that limbic system saying, man, I'm getting way too much information from that brainstem, right? So we can't attack that, but what we can do is attack that limbic system with our interventions to try to help us feel safe in environments where we historically have not felt safe. And then you guys get all this. This is kind of just all what I talked about. There's 2 more things I want to talk about. Shit. So that leads us into good old Stephen Porges. So we teach that handbrain to staff. And so what we learn is like, hey, is that individual we're serving, are they online? Were they offline when they engage that? When they're offline, what are some things we can do to help them feel safe in that moment, right? How can we structure their environment to help them feel safe? And what's something we can do when someone is offline to get them back online? Okay, so that leads us a little bit into our fear cascade, which is modeled off of Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, which takes us into how do we feel our feelings and our body. There are 2 different sides to our fear cascade. Okay, so let's see which one I want to use. Maybe I'll use this one because it's associated with our handbrain. So our biggest human need is connection. Human connection is our biggest human need. Our brains think that we're living 10,000 years ago, right? And 10,000 years ago, if we weren't with the tribe of people and we were ostracized, we're basically dead, right? So human connection is our greatest need. Even if we're introverts, we still need to have community. Right. And if, in our minds, human connection is so important that if we can't safely, what's going on? Oh, here it is. Oh, man, that's really small. If we can't safely flock, now we use Fs because it's just a way to remember. It's an easy way to kind of remember what it is. So that human connection is identified as a flock. If we can't safely flock or find a safe group of people to flock with, we'll find an unsafe group, right? So this is why gangs exist, rolling with the wrong crowd, things like that. Is an unsafe flock, right? But that safe flock can be what we're doing right now. We're in a community right now, whatever safe communities you may be in, families or, whatever organization you may be a part of. As soon as we start to feel unsafe and our cortex begins to come offline, our first urge is to flee a situation. It's not fight or flight, it's flight or fight, right? So once we start to feel unsafe, our first instinct is to flee. Right. And that is beginning to go down below our thinking brain and down into our fear center. So we don't have conscious control over the feeling that we get when we want to flee. We do have some control over what we may be able to flee to. Right. So if I don't have a safe place to flee, I'm going to unsafely flee. So we talk about elopement and talk about all this stuff. Right. When I start to feel unsafe, boom, I'm out the door without regard to my own personal safety because my body is telling me I feel unsafe. What we need to do is provide safe alternatives when we get that feeling to flee to. Fight, if we can't flee, we will fight ourselves out of a situation, right? So we may know what that looks like. That may look like physical aggression, whatever that may be. But while brainstem is telling us, hey, I'm feeling like I need to fight, cortisol runs through our body, right? And when that happens, we need to burn it off. So we need to do something physically safe to burn off that energy we're getting from being afraid or being angry. And if we don't provide safe alternatives, it's going to come out unsafely. Below that is freeze. Freeze looks like non-compliance, right? It looks like no affect. It looks like they're not responsive. It looks like they're oppositional, whatever you want to call it, right? That's where we're really getting down into that fear center, and our brains are really telling us we're not feeling safe, not even safe enough to fight, and I'm freezing, all right? That is where we also need to go in our brains in order to safely sit and concentrate. So we need to have a safe freeze in order to be able to learn and engage and sit in a learning environment like this, right? So providing those opportunities for safe freeze is important as well. And then ultimately, if we can't do any of that, we're going to submit or faint, which is submitting to the most powerful person in the room in order as a survival mechanism, right? If I go down the street, I'm going to the bank, someone puts a gun to my head, I probably will faint or submit to whatever it is because that's where it's a survival mechanism, right? Also, when we get into that brainstem, part of the brainstem, our body actually begins to physically prepare to die, like in the least painful way possible. So that's what faint submit looks like. A safe faint submit is actually where we need to feel safe enough in order to be able to fall asleep at night. If we have trouble sleeping at night, we're struggling with that central nervous system feeling safe enough to be able to fall asleep, right? So that's what we need to do to be able to safely fall asleep each night. Now, this is the only brag I'll ever do. My daughter drew all these. So these are just examples, but we also have a worksheet that goes with this fear cascade where we can actually identify what does unsafe flock, flee, fight look like for an individual we're supporting, and how can we provide safe alternatives to that fear cascade. Because again, once you start getting into that fear center, that fight and freeze and faint and submit, we don't have conscious control over those feelings. We need to be able to, when we identify those feelings, have a safe alternative, or else it's going to come out unsafely. So that's kind of how our hand brain interplays with our fear cascade. We teach both of those to all staff so that they can help understand a little bit where people are. A lot of times you'll see connections being made because when we served an older lady with a younger gentleman who just got along famously with this girl, she's probably 65, individual, they were up here. He moved on to another job or another position somewhere, right? And other staff came and we're like, wow, the other staff are doing great with her. This is wonderful, right? And lo and behold, 6 months later, The other guy's Durante, his job didn't work out. That's fine. So he's coming back. Yay, he gets to come back and work with the individual who we got along so well with. Well, the first day that he showed up back on his shift, and it was probably December, she ran out of her apartment in a robe, hit that new staff person, and then called the police on him, right? So what the hell happened, right? And so what we figured out was he was up here with her. When he left, other staff came and shoved her right here, right? And so what looked like compliance, what looked like, wow, we're getting everything we need, was actually her submitting. And once we begin to feel safe enough, our brain, it's too big of a leap to go from here to here. So once you're presented with a safe staff person again, you need to go up these steps. So he actually got hit. She ran out of the apartment and called the police because she was living in submit, right? And a lot of times we, as a provider agency, will get stuck in this faint, fight, flee cycle, where what looks like compliance is actually submission. And then when a safer staff shows up, we go right into, hey, man, how come every day I show up on second shift, I'm getting hit and the individual's running away? Well, first staff, he's great. Well, maybe he's down here and not up here. The goal is to get everyone up here so we can feel safe enough, right? And a lot of times we'll see when we present this to staff scenarios of, oh man, that makes a lot of sense with something that happened last week or whatever it may be. All right, that's our free casket. Here's our felt safety manual. And I'm just going to go over this part of it so that we can get into MUI after this. But essentially, this is the cover of that felt safety manual that I talked about before. And it shows how the most commonly used interventions interplay with each other. So I'm going to briefly describe what the intent behind this little graphic is. And then in our PowerPoint, it explains each one of these different interventions. Again, you don't have to know anything historically about an individual you're supporting in order to apply these. But you'll notice everything happens inside the context or the bubble of felt safety. So a tool that we use to help people feel safe in a moment is what we call a safety script. It also can be referred to as like a safety sandwich or whatever you want to call it, which is really you're identifying, hey, this is a safe place, right? I'm not going to let anyone hit you, so I can't let you hit me because this is a safe place. So you're putting safety on either end of it, and you're identifying the unsafe action that you want the individual to stop, saying, I'm not going to let that happen to you. So you can't do that to anybody else because this is a safe place. So that's just kind of the construct of what a safety script is. We modify safety scripts all the time. That's just kind of a brief example of what it looks like. And you don't have to know anything about anybody in order to be able to safety script them, right? And then we start really at the bottom, which is identified by this tool. This is a liftoff and landing. You may also know that this is roots and wings, but essentially what it is it's an activity that we do with individuals that help them identify what upregulates them, gives them joy, makes them happy, energizes them as a liftoff or a wing, and then things that help calm us down and help us regulate as a landing or a root. And we always do these things together. So never slap roots and wings in front of an individual. It's always something we do together. I've done 700,000 roots and wings probably in my life because every time we do it together. A common side effect to this is when you do a liftoff and landing with somebody, you're inevitably going to have a connection, right? Or maybe we'll manufacture it. It really doesn't matter. But essentially what we're trying to do is say, hey, I have working out as a liftoff for me, and you have working out as a liftoff for you. Now we have a connection. Right. Or I like riding roller coasters too, or something like that. Right. So now you're building that connection like we kind of like did this morning before we started and identifying what those are. And then landings. Also, you'll find sometimes people have a lot of liftoffs, but no landings. We need to be able to down regulate. So identifying activities that help people feel calm in the moment. We interplay that liftoff and landing. And once that's completed, we say, hey, when you're just finished getting off that roller coaster, where do you feel that in your body? Can you identify that? Can you give it a shape, size, and color? That's our person in a mandala. And the important thing there is to think about, because in our society, we never think about how we're feeling, right? We mask how we're feeling, right? We do unsafe things to not have to think about how we're feeling, right? But when we're actually doing something that's safe, that's upregulating, how does that make you feel in your body? Can you identify it, and can you give it a shape, size, and color? What we want to do is give it a name. So I've identified a light blue chest and shoulders feeling, right? So that's my feeling of, hey, when I was an SSA and I really had an impactful day and somebody moved and they had a new provider and I felt real good about it and I was driving home at the end of the day in my Hyundai Accent, I was getting that, man, kind of light feeling like this is why I'm doing this, right? If I knew this tool at the moment, I could go home and identify and give it a shape, size, and color because I want more of that. And I want more of that for the individuals we support too. So how can we get more of that safe feeling? Because we're also going to identify when I was completely offline and I had an unsafe action, where did I feel that in my body as well? Can I give that a shape, size, and color? Red hot chest and ear feeling, right? Like it starts to burn here and it comes down here. And the idea behind our anger volcano, which is the next thing, is to identify that feel good feeling at the bottom and that unsafe, completely offline feeling at the top, slow that process down from feeling regulated to completely blowing my top, identifying how that feels in our body. And once we begin to have those feelings, what are some things that we can do from our liftoff and landing or anything else to help cross over and get to that good feeling without continuing to escalate up, right? And keeping that cortex online. The last two interventions that we have here is Predict, Practice, and Plan B, which is a tool that we use to keep someone online when historically they've had an unsafe action to get them offline. Real fast, one thing that I did, again, we do this at home, right? So my daughter, not the best student in the world. It's 11:30. Not the best student in the world, but hey, she's going from a bunch of elementary schools into one central district, huge school. She's got all kinds of anxiety, whatever. What's it look like when you have Predict, Practice, and Plan B for her? Back to school night, right? You'd show up, it's an open house, you can walk around the school, you can get the schedule. We literally predict, practice, and Plan B. Okay, so we got your schedule, Natalie. Let's go. Where does the bus drop you off? This is bus slot number 317, right? So we're going to practice this. First of all, predict what you'd like to have happen today. Let's practice and go step by step. Okay, it's 9:02. We're going upstairs. And then I threw some Plan Bs. What happens when things go sideways? So you lost your schedule. Where do you go? Well, all the teachers on the first day of school are standing out in front of their room. Go up to any one of them and say, I lost my schedule, or go to the main office or whatever. You forgot the lunch. You forgot things that historically would have just completely shut you down and ruined your day. Thinking about what would a Plan B do? We went to a Reds game with an individual. His whole life is going to this Reds game. We've been talking about it for 6 months, right? God forbid there's a rain delay or something like that, or right, like shit happens all the time. So basically, it's like, what's a Plan B? If I know that this Reds game is rained out, I'm still going to have a connection with you. We're going to Western Bowl. We're going to have a bowling party, and then we're going to rain check and go to another Reds game. So instead of completely losing our minds, we're going to stay online and we're going to stay safe in historically times that we haven't. And then reflect on or connect is when we're offline, getting them back online. Reflecting back a big feeling that the individual is showing you. They're telling you I'm pissed off. You're pissed off. Thanks for letting me know. That's the honor, right? That's the connection. How can I help you feel safe in the moment? That's the connection. Reflect, honor, and connect back to safety, right? And so these are, again, some of the most commonly used things. When we do resilience-based de-escalation training, we talk and dissect those super much for an entire day. And we offer that training. It's a full day experience. Mary, Sarah, myself, and Danae can help facilitate these trainings. Again, it's a day-long thing, and it's really about practical application. I threw all this stuff on the thing because, if I thought maybe we'd have time to do anything, but we don't, so that's fine. But I really appreciate you guys listening to me ramble on. Questions or anything? My email is up here. If you guys have any questions at all about anything or want further explanation, I know 90 minutes isn't a ton of time, but feel free to email me and I'd be happy to help you out or see what we can do for your specific organization, okay? Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy, for coming.
Thank you.
Brandon,
You already steal his PowerPoint?
writing down. I have his PowerPoint.
I skipped a whole bunch of stuff.
Got it. I got it.
If you go to Mary's website, the Finding Hope Consulting, she has a really nice
trying to get your email
resources around
down,
these
so I
too,
got it.
like the
Thank you so
CP
much.
script.
Uh-huh.
It's a really cool one.
Yeah.
And then she'll going to tell you like neuroscience, what's happening.
Yeah, she'll give you the why.
Yeah.
So yeah, Finding Hope Consulting is a great resource. Soulbird Consulting, which is Sarah Buffy's. They do a newsletter that they blast out. Really, really cool stuff. And she does like an interview every month or something like that with someone who is in this world who, I haven't seen one that I haven't had a little nugget of something that's helped me. So,
She has some nice infographics you can print off too.
Uh-huh. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
I gotta get these markers back because they're
I was
expensive.
gonna
Keep
say,
the
these are
paper.
sweet markers. I don't know if anybody
Now, did you
realized
realize that, like, okay, so these markers, there's a tiny tip.
Yeah.
and
And
a
they're,
thick one.
yeah. These are nice.
I'm a little bit colorblind though, so I'm pretty sure there's only like 3 colors and I just keep repeating.
These are pretty similar in color.
Hey, Andy, will you introduce our MUI presentation?
MUI,
Yep, go ahead, tell them.
welcome for the,
Jen Walling, Jamie.
I guess I'll stand up front. Does that help
Yes,
online see better?
and hear you better.
Jamie, you have to come.
Hey, thank you so much.
Did you bring?
no,
Okay,
it's all yours.
thanks.
Stand, you're just gonna stand there.
I know, but this would be, I think, the like formal introduction piece too.
I introduced myself last time. I'll come up.
Get up here. All right, so everybody, I hope online you can see me. I always hate this because I feel like I don't know where people are and I'm gonna be talking to their backs. So I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
What is that?
Stand where they can see.
These are a different account. I don't want to know.
That's what I'm figure out.
Hey, Jamie. Yeah. What is this?
Appreciate it.
I'm gonna walk you out. I don't know why that's not. By XO. There we go.
That helps me a little bit because now I can see you all. And then that way I'll feel like I'm not talking around. You don't want to stay for a minute.
Speed limit 70, Andy.
Yeah.
That means you can go 78.
Yeah. So welcome, everyone. I'm Jen Walling, and I am the MUI coordinator / court liaison. And Jamie is up here, so I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to know that she is a wonderful part of our MUI today now.
Let's see. That's good.
So I just want to give her a second. to-
Oh, I don't come over here.
Yeah, she can walk over here by me.
Oh, there we go. Hello, everybody.
And so what I think most of you all are going to appreciate today is that this is just sort of a check-in, a little bit of update. We've sent out some emails recently to folks and just kind of maybe touching base on some best practice pieces, some dates that are coming up, and then maybe having some questions. So it's not going to be the, throw at you type thing. So one of the biggest things that we want to let you know is that our stakeholders meeting, please mark on your calendar for July 20th. And we'll be sending out some more information, but since I have you here, July 20th, and then we'll be letting you know time and location when you get that reminder, because we're kind of working out exactly which building we're going to be using for that, but it will be July 20th. Your annual reports with all the extensions and all the move-ons that they've had with the Ohio ITMS, I always call it the wrong thing. They keep pushing that out. Your annual reports are due July 28th. And stakeholders meeting has to be completed by July 28th. So get your reports in. The other piece of that is noted across the state, we have found that some providers are being asked to present their annual reports when they're being reviewed. At our last accreditation, it was asked how we are tracking which providers in Fairfield County are sending in their annual reports on time. And so I said, our our providers are great. They said, well, we're going to start asking about that more often. And then they're going to want a list of people who do not send in their annual reports. And then the state will be contacting providers who have not complied with that part of the rule. So I am giving everyone that big heads up that we want to just really make sure that we're getting our annual reports in. Also, too, I know that we have providers who are in multiple counties, and we need to make sure that you're having documents for each of those counties. And I know that that probably seems, but they're just looking at making sure that if I get a UI log that says it's for Licking County and I get it in Fairfield, then it doesn't really look like I've gotten the things that ensure that you have reviewed individuals from Fairfield that are served. So, let's try to make sure that we're just staying on top of those things and getting that in properly for those pieces. Little reminder about the quarterly logs. So we no longer have to do that semi-annual. I think everybody's a little bit gotten adjusted into that. However, I still have providers who send in a report at the semi-annual mark and seem very confused that they don't have to do that anymore. So I'm just trying to remind people, because it's just one less form you have to fill out. Don't have to send those in July like you used to have to do. That, having those monthly logs, using those, and, if you want to do a check-in for your agency at that midpoint, because that's kind of what that semi-annual was designed for, was to help it not be so overwhelming at the end of the year. But again, it's just another time frame that they took away to give you less of that. But using that as a check-in for your January through June, kind of making sure you have all that together, and doing that. One of the other things that we did send out was the UI log reminder pieces. And I know I've gotten a lot of emails back from people, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that people are asking for clarification. I appreciate that people are going, oh yeah, I never sent that in. Checking if theirs are right. And so the biggest question that people seem to have is they misunderstood a part about if they have no MUIs, you still can draw a line through the form, because we talked real intensively in that email about not leaving any blanks. But we did not mean that you had to write no 30 times or do anything in every single line on the form, okay? We're looking at it collectively in the boxed areas, making sure that it's not left with nothing, as information so that it can be clear. The biggest things that we had during our review were forms submitted that had no signature. Signed, reviewer, and date, missing those things. That was like a really big piece of things that were missing. And that would be something that the state would expect us to respond to. So we just tried to just send a thing out to everybody. The other thing, and I know I get it, is there's the part on the form about, did you identify any trends and patterns, yes or no? So if you said no, the next question is, did you address any trends or patterns? And you would assume that because you said no in the top one, that it should be obvious that you didn't address any because you didn't have any. But the state would say that they want that marked. That would be one of their recommendations and best practices, is that even if you say no at the top, answer the second question and say no at the bottom. And then I'm just going to say, put
These boxes.
Yeah.
At the bottom, if you guys aren't familiar.
Yeah, if you guys need one in front of you here, we can make sure. And we attached a sample. We attached a sample to the email and highlighted all the areas, which is basically the entire form, to make sure that you don't leave any blanks. I would just throw a not applicable, an NA in that other box, or line through the box, whatever. Just try to complete it as fully as possible. Name, agency, sign it, date, the month that you're sending in. That's another thing too. They'll send it in, here's your log, no UIs, no month on it. So I know you probably are in the practices of things, or where it's combined months or those things. They've kind of shied away from allowing that, but if it's really clear that you're not having anything to report and you put more than 1 month on there, we're not gonna jump up and down about that, but just for best practice. Again, using the list that we also attached in the email that identifies the things that are the UIs they expect for providers to be writing up, doing cause and contributing factors, doing prevention plan, and doing a UI investigation. Making sure that there's something substantially written up and a report of some sort that is following up with those specific items. Now, we all know that the caveat in the rule is that if you have something that is particular to that person, because our entire goal in life is to stay person-centered, correct? So if you have somebody who has something that isn't on that little magic list, but you feel it's important, we want to encourage you to do those same steps with that person, follow through with that process. There are no penalties for using an incident report as a communication tool to the team for any incident that you feel needs that level of, looking into, because that's where you're going to have the best prevention, the best felt safety for a person when you're thinking about those things and you're looking at stuff. So putting those things into practice and understanding that those next steps come through that, I think are the best ways to do that. We still want to offer a UI investigation follow-up training, which will happen this fall. We really finally feel that we've gotten to where we can have people in person and make it a more practical application. And I know we've been saying it and we want to offer it and we've been doing it, but conduciveness to things. We will do it in small groups, so we may have more than one, because we want it to be something that you have time to develop and have that piece to happen. So that will be coming this fall. So watch for information about that. Some of you in Fairfield County may have gotten an email back from Jamie and I that said, yeah, we think this is program implementation. It's kind of on that cusp of things, but we'd like for you to send in your UI investigation to put in as part of our review. And the reason why we're doing that is to make sure that, because we get an accreditation, we can get things pulled at all times. And we're that filtering level for you. And we want to make sure that we're having that best practice of helping review to make sure we didn't miss something, so that when you get a review, maybe it could have been an MUI and we just needed a little more information, because not until we figure it out that it meets the criteria is when it's behind, when we need to get it filed. So we have some time for those things. It's immediate actions being done that are the most important piece. And we all know that. So those are some pieces of that email that went out. And then prevention plan reviews. I don't know if any of the folks that are on line here have gotten any of those emails from us. I'm not.
Probably Kim.
Kim may have. Kim may have gotten one. And I don't think anybody in the room has had one. But what we've been doing is when an MUI closes, so let's talk it through the practice. Incident happens, you turn in your UI by 3:00 the next day, it's reviewed by MUI, it gets filed, you find out the MUI number, the category it definitely fit into, and the ball's rolling, right? And so we're doing those pieces. The rule states that we want to have everything complete in 45 days. Okay, but does that always happen? No. And it hasn't happened because people aren't available, can't get a record, law enforcement's involved. So sometimes those things trickle out a little farther than that, and we get to that point. Once the investigation has actually come to a conclusion, whether it's within the 45 days or maybe 60, we try really hard not to get much past that, but a lot of times some of those law enforcement pieces are not in our control. We turn that in. You're going to get this email that says, we would like for you to submit a prevention plan. And that's a prevention plan that is developed through the team aspect, because that's what the rule says. Prevention should be guided by the provider, but developed through the team. And then the provider helps lay out, and the county board, the ISC will help decide where it goes in the plan or how those things to help guide and then have those replacements in the plan. So once that closes and you send in that prevention plan and you get that final summary letter, that is basically the date that we're calling the close date. And so you may get an email from us 45 days after that, 30 days to 45 days after, asking how that prevention plan is going. And what the state is looking at from that piece is, we don't want to write prevention plans to just write prevention plans. We want to make things that are measurable and that have, some steps and outcomes built to them, okay? So if someone went to the hospital and they get out and we close out the thing and you get it 45 days past that and everything was done before 45 days and you haven't really had, like sometimes the prevention plan that you submitted, by the time it closes, every appointment's been followed through, everything started, the new medicines happened, and you're doing those things. That's your prevention. That 45-day check-in is, how's it still going? Because what could have happened is, put them on this medicine, and they were doing it 30 days later, it stopped working, right? Or they were monitoring for something else and waiting because they thought it could be another piece that was happening. And now what are you doing with that? So it's all still layering and happening. So you're giving updates of how it's going based on what we've been trying to help, put in place for that safety net prevention. Does that kind of make sense? And if anybody has any questions, I'm always okay for you to just stop me and ask, okay? So that's all happening. So you're gonna maybe be getting those questions. One of the things that they really want is verifiable information. So just saying, oh yeah, staff took them to the doctor and everything was great. Okay, well, they want, staff took them to the doctor on May 31st, and here's the little slip where they said, no longer needs to do the, whatever you're following and taking back and using in the home or using to change the ISP, or that you've had 4 team meetings and you've tried these other interventions and, or whatever. You're going to have some documentation of some sort. Daily logs, case notes, appointment, has been actually, completed, trainings that have occurred, pieces that have done that, something that's verifiable. That's what they want. Just summary and that document uploaded into that link that'll get sent out. If you have questions, some of them are tricky. We've had people say, well, it was like, talk to them about tying their shoes. I don't really have any way to verify that they, have been tying their shoes. It's like there are some things like that, but you've probably documented it somewhere about reminders. Or maybe they decided, what, I'm tired of tying my shoes. I'd really like to go purchase a pair of, slip-on shoes, and that's all better. So maybe there is something that's done that. It can be a case note, but something where it's been documented, because if we don't document it, what? Didn't happen. So it should be easy to have those things. It should be things that you're already using for billable purposes, for all kinds of things. And we can be creative with them, It's just, we want to make sure that we're doing those things. And then the reviews can go on up to 120 days. It's kind of like the state has said, 30, 60, 90, 120. We hope that they're all finished. Have any of you all ever gotten a email from us that said DODD question? Maybe not. But what it is that when they decide to go back and review the MUI and we put the prevention plan in, everybody's steadily going along, they finally read the report and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, well, what about this? And so they may throw that question out there. And so what I want to say is, it's not that anybody's doing anything that is not safe. Okay, we're gonna not say incorrect, we're gonna say, not safe. It's not that you're not, that that's happening. It's that now that they've reviewed it through a different lens, through a different set of questions, they need that. Because not only are we closing it down out here as a team, and are we closing it out at the county level, they've got it up there and they're getting to their point where they feel good enough to say, let's close this one out. That's why they want the 45, the 60, the 90, the 120 if something's still hanging. An example of how one might hang out there till 120 days, which I hope that we could just shut one down much sooner than that. But if you're waiting for a referral, we've had somebody that maybe has gone for a referral and it's a 3-month wait, right? And then what have we done in between? We might be updating. We've tried this other doctor. We've done this. We're still waiting for that referral. We're following all their recommendations. They finally get that referral and then they come in and see them and they go, okay, I want you to come back in 30 more days. And so it's still kind of hanging out there and open. And we still have some of those pieces that we're putting together. So again, those questions, those pieces of things are not about the things that aren't happening. It's about the things that we're just showing are still making progress. Because what are we working every day with individuals that we're working with? Outcomes and progress. So we want to make sure that even through MUI, we are looking at outcomes and progress, safety. Those are the pieces that we're looking at. So that's pretty much what we wanted to talk today, is that when those emails come, if it doesn't make sense, I had someone reply to me that this was completely ridiculous and they didn't understand what, and so I appreciated that. And like I said, it says no. Why would I need to say no again? I get it. But there's someone else who, when they're doing that, we want you to feel that when a reviewer walks in, because when, just what Andy was talking about, that probably a reviewer calls you and says, I'm coming to your place. What's that do to you? Right? County board's going through accreditation. We have all that time to plan, but for those months and that week before, everything starts going like you just don't, you know your job, you're doing your things, but everything's all, oh gosh, what are they going to ask for? Am I going to have everything ready? So we want you to have that felt sense of safety when the reviewer calls, that you have all your stuff together. Okay? And even though we have it all together, somebody always has a question that isn't what we thought of or what we saw it through our lens of things, and they're seeing it through a different lens. So we do not have to go offline because they asked us that, right? They just need a little bit of time to understand, and we can help them do that and get the information. So I really want it to be more of that piece of things. We have changed our UI log review process. It used to always just be MUI who reviewed those logs. We have welcomed some other members of our staff to join Jamie and I to do those reviews. We've invited someone from the behavior support role of things to help identify, especially if you have ABC charts and different things that you're turning in and you're calculating some things. The language that people use sometimes on those log forms or in response to that, and MUI goes, we go offline when we start reading that stuff. And so we'll have some of that. And then we brought in, and I'm going to probably butcher what her title is, Chelsea's title, okay.
She's like the QA for SSA.
So the quality assurance person for all of our ISCs and SSA department, she's sitting in with us so that she can look at things at a practical matter, that if a prevention plan and how it's fitting into the plan, and making sure that we put that also lens of review around the practicalness of being in the plan. Did it make it into the plan? Are we, following things changing? So we're trying to wrap that in to give you all some of that extra support in those other ways that you are dealing with people from our agency and not just MUI. So stakeholders on what day?
28th.
Nope. Stakeholders meeting on July 20th. And your reports are due July 28th. Your next round of quarterly reports are due July 15th. Okay, so that would be your ones for April, May, June, and those are due by July 15th. So questions, thoughts about MUI, things that have just been, anything that has to do with MUI. If we don't know the answer, we'll get the answer back to you.
Covered everything.
All right, nothing out there, crickets, nobody's? Okay, well, keep up the good work. Short and simple, told you guys it'd be easy today.